every day, there's less and less people that want to climb the BS ladder in corporations.
We paid big money.
In a world where QR codes kill kittens and customer service is an oxymoron, UnPodcast has set out to make things right. This is the UnPodcast.
Allison Stratton. Gotta edit that. Hi, everybody. Well, shaken. Episode 2 of The Return, but 3-something.
I think 304?
306? Wayne?
I don't know.
Anybody know? I don't know.
We don't know. Welcome to 310. Welcome to the UnPodcast.
Welcome back. Upwards of 8 or 7. Good to hear you. Good to see you.
We're going to need to get new T-shirts made. Upwards of 8.
Oh my God. Open the factory again. Let's all start this up again. So usually if you're new to the show, first of all, we're surprised you're back. So thank you for coming back for your second episode of the new run.
It's been 5 years. People have probably moved. And
usually what we do with episodes are smorgasbord episodes. Usually just a taste of everything. A charcuterie of crap, if you may, is what we do, by the way. Can we just pause?
It's not what I would call it.
Can we just do a side pause here for a moment? Can we just do a sidebar for a moment about charcuterie? Can we remind everybody, if we call something a charcuterie, that it needs to have meat on it?
Have you been cheated out of meat on your charcuterie board?
I'm just saying we can't throw the term charcuterie around willy-nilly.
You are so posh now. Like, you used to be like...
It's been 5 years. I've changed, baby. I've changed.
No, I think you're doing this because you know what we're going to talk about first, and you're trying to present yourself as bougier than you actually are.
We are.
Yeah. You're trying to talk about charcuterie because you know how we're starting the show, and you think...
Charcuterie means meat.
And you think these 8 people are actually going to believe that you are
civilized,
cultured, and eat... Like it's a plate of cheese and meat. You can just call it a plate.
Unrelated, there's an article from The Hustle, which is, it's time for the Uncrustables revolution.
Good Lord.
One of the greatest food groups of all time.
Of course. You read your story, and then I will shame you.
This is under the food group of prepared foods. Traditional PB&J sandwiches are about to go the way of the Dukes of Hazzard lunchboxes. I'd take one of those. Oh, no, that's racist. The idea that ketchup is anything but a vegetable. Isn't Dukes of Hazzard racist? I don't know, like the thing on the top of the... anyway, we won't get into that. This is if J.M. Smucker Company and its surging Uncrustable brand get their way at least. They are sealed, crustless PB&J sandwiches with crimped edges like a palm-sized ravioli. Sales for Uncrustable in 2024 are estimated to reach $900 million thanks to their convenience. Put a frozen disc in your lunch in the morning, and by noon, it'll thaw to a soft, ready-to-eat sandwich. And their staggering popularity among football players.
And how much did you say they made?
$900 million.
Okay, so figure how much of that is us.
At least
700?
10% of that.
10%?
Yeah, but so I have a beef with Smuckers, the company, and Uncrustables in general.
This is a you problem.
Look, I don't want to sue them. I don't want to get any governing body after them.
I think it's an unmarketing thing. Like you take it.
I enjoy them greatly. Yeah. I enjoy Uncrustables frozen, slightly thawed. Slightly thawed. So when you make your coffee, put the package of Uncrustable on top of the coffee like it's a stroopwafel, right? Like we're Dutch. Put it up there. It warms it a little bit, takes the frost off.
You're such a liar. You put it in the microwave.
No, I don't do that anymore. I put it on top of my coffee now. On top of my Mickey Mouse coffee mug, and it
Disney
naturally,
coffee mug.
heats it up a bit, a little warmer, like a stroop.
Okay,
waffle.
So here's the thing.
And then I take the crust off of it.
Okay, there. Okay.
Uncrustables have a crust.
No, it's their entire thing that they don't have a crust.
They just call it a crimped edge.
No. Because what happens is that I come downstairs in our house, everywhere I go, I know where Scott has been because there's a plate, and on the plate are circles of crust only with the middle part eaten out, and he's left the crust, these circle crusts all over the house on plates.
Except you keep saying it, and you're backing my point.
Have we been marketing?
You just said a circle crust.
No, have we been marketing all along? That's my question to you, okay? Are you telling me we're marketing here?
We're unmarketing.
No, okay, well, I'm sorry, but apparently... We need to unmarket
Uncrustables. You have crusts.
Yeah,
and
Scott.
By the way, take your crusts off the Uncrustables, they're even better.
No, he'd love to be sponsored by Uncrustables. That's why the story is really
Smuckers,
here.
Drop us a line.
Honestly.
We love you. Now, back to one of the topics, like I was trying to say before, but I interrupted myself, is we usually do smorgasbord episodes, a charcuterie of crap, if you may.
Oh, my God.
And usually it's a bunch of different stories, but since we're just coming back, last week's episode was AI. This week we're going to talk about return to office.
And I figured this sort of organization will last, 4 to 6 episodes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then it'll fall apart.
I'm
probably.
saying after this one.
Oh, you think after this one?
Yeah, I think after this one, it's just whatever.
Okay, well,
Bob's
let's
your
see.
uncle,
Let's give it a try.
Right. So there's a bunch of different things.
I do have an
we
uncle.
look
I
at,
did have an uncle
right?
named
Return to office, work weeks, 4-day work week, all this type of stuff goes out there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go on a little bit of a miniature rant. If
Okay,
I may.
I'll sit back.
Just miniature.
I'll sit back.
It's miniature, so don't adjust seating too much. But I have a dilemma.
Okay.
A dilemma. The only dilemma I've ever had in my life. But I have a dilemma. So for my job, what I do for a living, which is speak at conferences, if you may, do keynotes, opening and closing keynotes, associations and corporations. One of the things that you can say at associations sometimes, but not at corporations, is you can never contradict the highest paid person in the room.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense. I mean, you were hired to be there. Yeah.
I'm not hired to convince they're working at a bad company. Obviously,
of course.
I'm not hired to. People. The biggest fear is the contradiction.
Of course.
They come up and say, "We're doing this," and then some jackass with a man bun, who's a misplaced sound guy at the event,
with a bunch of crustable crust hanging off his wrist,
hanging off, is saying, "You should all work from home." Okay.
Yeah.
I understand it's a kiss of death. It's like walking up and saying, "You got to pay people more," right? But when people ask us to talk about what's affecting people at work and what makes them productive or not productive or loyal or not loyal or staying with you or not staying with you, is like going to a firefighting convention and saying you just can't bring up water. We are open to it, Scott. We are open to all of these opinions. You just can't bring up water because they're our main competitor.
Yeah, it's the only thing you're not allowed to talk about is rain.
So I can't talk about what actually happens.
Yeah.
Because we went through this thing, and not to rehash old news, but we went through this thing some of us refer to as a pandemic, that we went through these things and we all worked from home.
Because it has been a while since
much.
we've been on the podcast.
And a whole bunch of people worked from home. And everybody came back and said, all right, hey, come on back to the office. And people all kind of just went, why?
Yeah.
Because you have this whole thing of people saying, well, you were not only profitable, some companies were even more profitable during it, and notice from home. Because 23 years ago, 24 years ago, I wanted to work from home from the last job I really had. Owen was about to be born, and I went to the president of the company. I said, I'd like to telecommute, because we called it telecommuting back then. I was a sales training manager. I had no in-office thing to do. Right? I went out and trained our distributors and all this type of stuff. And they're like, well, we just don't do that telecommuting thing. And I'm like, cool. And I never went back.
Yeah.
And one of the things now is the fact that we proved it. We proved we could do it. And there's a whole and by the way, I'm saying this now and forevermore. I'm not saying everybody wants to work from home. I'm not.
Or that it works for every job.
100% for every job. Everything is, the problem is people are trying to blanket the other way.
Yeah. I think blanket in both directions is a really damaging thing to do.
When I talk to people, when I talk to leaders, and when I talk to so many about this, and it's always the same. It's human nature. We're the exception. It's always we're the exception.
Yeah.
And we look at every single thing out there, and I say, look, if it's so much better, because that's what I hear from leaders. It's better. It's more collaborative. It's better
to come
creative.
Into the office.
It's more this. And all I say is, no matter what reason you give me, no matter what crap you come up with, and you've convinced yourself is the reason, all I say back to that person is one thing. If it's so great, why do you have to make it mandatory? Why? If it's so much better, because we're talking about your employees, so it's so much better, they're more productive, they get this stuff, then they're coming in anyways. Well, why aren't they coming in? Because they have a world and a life outside of work. And the problem is back in the 70s and the 80s, and go way back as far as you want to go. It was you come to work, you leave your emotions at the door, you're supposed to, you come do your job and you go home.
Yeah.
But that changed. But people are like, well, it's kids these days. No. The deal changed.
Yeah, the expectations really shifted.
And the deal changed. We went to a 24/7 world, international world, global shipping, everything else. And it was also you're on call and everything shifted.
Branding and social media. And,
economy, right? 2 working parents, all these things, everything shifts and shifts. And then we shifted in the 90s to less full-timers, more part-timers, less benefits, all of this. And we started shifting more and more again. Capitalism, woohoo, here we go. And now we simply are lying to everybody to come back to the office. And what I mean by this is a couple of things. Leadership turns to their employees and says, you need to come back because it's better for you. They're not 6 years old. They know it's not. but we're not being honest with them, because the actual reasons for return to office is true now, and it's always been this way when it comes to office spaces. Multiple reasons. One is ego. That I've climbed the ranks, or I built this company, or whatever that is, and walking around an office as a CEO or a president or a leader, there's a vibe to that. You're a leader. People act differently when you walk in. And you want some of that. I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but aren't you kind of lying a bit if you're not saying part of that is ego? Part of that's a feeling of being a leader walking around an office. I had a meeting with a leader out just fairly close to here.
Yeah.
And it was a manufacturing industrial area. It was an incoming CEO and outgoings, and we had a meeting because I was going to do a talk, and they were local, so I went and hung out with them. And this was right when kind of this whole returning to office was starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I asked, and he said, we'd like you not to talk about it on stage, but we'd love to hear your opinion in this room of what you think about return to office. Because for myself, I have a unique background. I have an HR background as well. I went to college for HR. I worked in HR. Like I've also, my job was keeping people at companies. That's the whole goal. And I gave my thoughts. I said, look, they're adults. Let them choose. You know, some people like coming in, some they don't. As long as the work gets done in the cloud for the most part anyways. You can be anywhere anyways. That was part of a selling point. That's what laptops are. Laptops, they're built to be portable, right? And people coming into work to plug in their laptop they already had at home, it just seems a little weird to me. So I'm talking to them. And I said, well, I would give them the choice. If your employees truly are your company, then they know best, potentially. Yeah, there's exceptions to rules, sure, but we're always making rules based on those exceptions. And the outgoing CEO said, well, Scott, the problem is we lose the serendipity of the hallway conversations. And I'm like, of course we do, of course. But also, you're the CEO.
Yeah. Those conversations feel a lot different to you than they do to other people, probably.
Later on that day, I talked to somebody who I knew in the company, and I'm like, hey, the CEO mentioned this about hallway conversations. He's like, listen, let me tell you what the hallway conversations are. It's 20 to 25 minutes of time you can't walk away from. Yeah. Him telling stories he's already told us. So it's like the executive has no clothes.
Yeah. I think too, like it's like an easier way. Like when people are in the office, it's almost like a body, like you can kind of like count the bodies. You can count, yeah. See the busyness, you can see the work, and there's a certain like simplicity, I guess, in being able to say, okay, we're working today because everyone's in the office and everyone's at work. And like we've been sort of trained that way, right? As opposed to focusing on the processes and the work, which is sort of like a different framework of saying like, okay, but there's work involved, right? Like so obviously the pandemic forced hybrid work. Like it wasn't something that any of us choose to do because a lot of people have been campaigning and asking, like you said, you asked a long time ago. Many people have been asking for remote options for their work or hybrid options. But it forced it to happen. And then we saw, some companies saw how it could be better, or people experienced how they were still able to do their work and maybe be able to have a better quality of life while still doing the same amount of work. And now it's sort of like, well, it was easier when we could just count everybody. And there's an inability to disconnect the progress that was made during COVID because we were forced from the feeling of COVID, which was scary and a lot of uncertainty, and we don't know if things are going to work out, and we haven't been able to separate it. So anytime we're talking about, we should be back in the office, it's like we're trying to capture the feeling from before, like that lack of insecurity, that lack of worry. Except that's gone. Like this has already happened. You can't pretend. And doing the work to have it set up can actually help, but it is work. Like it's saying like we can't rely on the counting the people. We can't rely just on that. So what can we do to keep it going?
And the fact that you didn't have your employees didn't work from home. They worked from home in a pandemic.
Of course.
So you don't
That's
even,
what I mean though.
Yeah,
like it's so emotional because it's attached that we haven't been able to separate it.
You don't even know what your employees would be like working from home, not during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. With their kids home from school.
It's so different, right? So but there's multiple reasons still. There's still more reasons. And one of the main reasons is also, there's two parts to it, okay? There's your office lease, and one of the articles here we have mentions, there it is. This is from resume.org, and it was 54% of return to work policies that they had surveyed for.
Yeah.
The office lease played a big part in it.
Of course.
So let's remove the sunken cost fallacy whole thing and everything on here. It was office leases, and then I started talking to more people. It was actually civic agreements. Yeah. So a lot of downtowns, places have tax breaks for corporations if you have your office in the city, wherever that is.
And there's all the businesses, right?
But part of that, though, is that agreement on the tax break for your corporation is only given to you if your office is occupied at 80% or higher.
Yeah.
So companies are like, oh, wait, no, that's going to cost us tax money. You have to come back. Imagine being a team. Imagine being a team at a company listening right now, and you found out the reason you had to add back your 2 to 3 hour commute 5 days a week for this company after you worked your ass off them during a pandemic was because they weren't going to get the same tax break.
And there is like a leadership divide there where leadership isn't telling the truth, right? And that's a part of leadership is how do you share, what the real information is, but not in a way that you're giving too much or not giving enough. You have to, because we're adults and we figure out these things pretty quickly. And then you saying, I'm doing this for you, gets feels less and less ingenuous every single time that new facts are
And it gets
introduced.
shut down. It gets shut down immediately and never talked about again.
Yeah.
You know how here's the thing. So if you're listening right now and you're new to a company or you're coming into an industry and you're like, all I got is I got time and hustle.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. I'm going into the office. I'm kissing asses. I'm kissing babies. I'm shaking hands. I'm getting coffee runs for my superiors. I am climbing the ladder. But I have news for a lot of people. Every day, there's less and less people that want to climb the BS ladder in corporations.
Well, I think that's also because you see that when you get something like you are able to work from home, you're not given the trust to be able to do that.
And so part of it's like, well, if you want to get promoted, you got to commit. And what happened was, I can't remember if it was Amazon or another company said, they came out, it was worldwide, and said, you will not be eligible for promotions internally unless you work in the office. And 60% of people said, no problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
I would like challenge anyone's listening who wants to send us good stories about return to the office.
Or bad,
I would
or
love
bad.
to hear them.
Also take bad.
Yeah, we're like drowning in bad.
Yeah,
but
but
I would like, because
on podcast.
I want to hear good stories too.
Email at us, unpodcast@unmarketing.com. Send us an email.
We need like an angel and a devil. They can send the bad stories to you and the good stories to me. And we can fight about it.
Please send those things, or if you have made up words you'd like us to read out, it's a segment of our show back in the day that we'll bring back again if you'd like. A word you see that was just made up by a corporation. It was weird. You're just like, what?
Yeah, we haven't had a made up word. It's because all the words are made up now.
No, we just want to play the jingle.
We're so old.
We are so old.
Can I just add this? I want to add.
Go.
So this is an article from shrim.org, and they're talking about some of those negative things like isolation. Like, for example, like in remote work, in hybrid work, we're very quick to say like not to force back to the office, but there's also another side of it with people experience isolation and stuff because the office, and maybe this is for the CEO, right? Like maybe, and I get that, right? Like if you've spent a lot of years in an environment where you go into the office and you spend time with other people, this is your social area. And so
100%.
Being home can cause a lot of isolation. And it was really interesting in the article to hear them talk about like even just talking about that.
Yeah.
Like as a company reaching out to your employees, and I'm not talking about like, some kind of pretend mental health thing that you're doing instead of addressing their needs, but just talking to employees about isolation and seeing how they're feeling. Are you able to connect with your team in hybrid work? Because we can work on those issues too. Like there's so many ways to meet together in different like capacities online to communicate in different ways. So even just for leaders, just addressing that isolation, right? Because that's kind of the other side of the coin. Like we don't want to force them back, but we also need teams that work together. We need teams that cooperate. We need teams that trust each other. And even though, we joke around about the water cooler and the CEO, it is true that there's trust that's built in teams just from being together in the same room. So it's both, addressing both of them, I think is really important.
Again, like we said last episode, you and I are certain examples of virtually connecting as well, and how you have both of those type of things. The problem is though, when it's like, I heard a couple people say this too. It's like, well, I just thrive when there's other people around me. And I'm like, I get it, but your coworkers aren't your emotional support humans.
Yeah, no. This isn't about you. You're not in the center.
What I need is 5 introverts to show up because they won't talk over me, and then I can just tell my stories. By the way, that is me, right? That room of introverts. I'm just like, what's up, everybody? Want another story? Here we go, all right? Like that. So the office, I get that, and I'm not taking that away.
Yeah.
I don't want to take necessarily. People are like, well, there's less people. Yeah, that's called choice.
But that's what I mean. Like we can find
Right.
social ways and ways to reach out and support employees without the forcing, right?
100%.
And also being in the same room, we weren't necessarily more connected. There is an assumption there that everyone in the office was connected because the few people who are the most vocal are like, I loved when we're in the office. Okay, but what if all the people who maybe didn't love being in the office? Did you talk about that with them?
Right.
Did you try and make it a safer, more welcoming space for everyone? Because, if you're not doing that work when you're all together, you're not doing it when they're remote.
Yeah.
Right? It's the
And it's
same
interesting.
kind of problems
It's
happen.
like, and there's an extreme here too that like we had one of the things we had on the list today was talking about like the 4-day work week. And like it's something I don't even broach on stage. I don't never bring up on stage. I'm like, that is so radical here in North America, where Europe, a couple of things was like in Germany, they just started doing 4-day work. I found it really interesting. Was also the effects of a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
Because when I think 4 days, I'm like, oh, they give Fridays off, so it's 3 weekends every time. No, that 5th day is rotating. It changes up. And one of the studies they had noticed was if they just made Thursday the new Friday, Thursday's productivity would drop a bit. So they started rotating them. And that was one of the things was rotating the day off.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
so what it did, though, when they condensed it to 4 days, people started taking meetings much more seriously. Meaning they weren't calling them as often, and when they were focused and quick.
That's one of the things I think that I'm really interested in are the processes, like I said. So like how can we get these things done so that we have more time to do the work that we really need to do? And sometimes limiting that time can help it. Or, only coming into the office means that's when you have to have the meeting.
100%. So here's the thing from the article. This was on Euro Weekly News. There was a campaign kicked off in Germany at the end of 2023 by organization 4-Day Week Global. It gained significant traction in Spain, the UK, and Portugal in previous trials, and it preaches the 180-100 concept. This means employees will retain 100% of their salary, work 80% of the time, but contribute 100% of their output still. A whopping 73% of companies that trialed plan to stick with their new weekly schedule, with the remaining 27% either making minor tweaks or yet to decide. Listen to that number. 73% of these companies were going to do this new 4-day work week, and 27% were still going to do something with it, but tweaking it. That's the shift. The problem is, again, this idea has to be from the highest paid in the room. I've seen it shut down so quickly in front of us, right with you. I've seen it when I'm talking about, like, we're actually having a good conversation about remote and in person. I'm having it with an executive of a very popular consumer brand in the States. We're sitting and having a great conversation. Like, literally, I'm like, we're feeling a vibe. And I'm like, I finally found an executive that gets it. And at the very end, he's like, by the way, don't bring this up to my team afterwards. They all come into the office, but we're different. I'm like, son of a, like, we're always the exception. We had another executive we
It's
had
almost
talked
like
to.
everyone wants to work less.
Oh my God. Another person's like, well, yeah, we're great. We're ethical. We do this. And like all the things they're doing is not.
Yeah.
And it's this view of like, we're always the exception as you looking at your company from the outside is part of that.
It's autonomy and control. Like, I just think that you see that buy-in from employees.
Right.
When they have that autonomy and control. And for some people, that's coming in. For some people, it's coming in on Thursday to Sunday, like it depends.
The problem is if you shoot down that idea or somebody else gets shot down, then every idea is going to be considered insubordination.
Yeah.
And then you just be quiet. And here's the real challenge. And here's the thing where people listening right now, I think more people are in this situation than anything else we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is what happens if you're a leader, maybe it's mid-level, maybe you're or close to the top. You believe in this, but the person above you doesn't. How do you work with your team where you know what the right thing to do is? Your team is struggling because they were working from home and it was fine. You don't want to lie to them.
Yeah.
Well, part of it is you create that little pod of your people
Yeah.
and you support them in the ways you can, right?
You work at the processes, like figuring out the best way to do things so everyone's feeling involved. I really think that's
But the best
leader's
advice
job.
always for that is always, it's the communication. You have to be careful because you can't be insubordinate to your boss and turn around and say, look, they're an asshole, but let's do it. But you can, by the way. You can say that whenever you want. But
You shouldn't, though.
But a part of it's showing is saying, hey, look, this is what the company's deciding to do. And also part of that's, you can also teach the empathy. It's like, hey, look, I can't change this,
Yeah.
right? And my job is to support what comes down from here and do the best we can. Having a straight conversation versus a defensive conversation sometimes too.
I also think there's a ton of room in between forcing everyone back to the office, this is what we're doing, and a 4-day week or entirely remote work. I think we get very caught up in this idea that it's either going to be a 4-day work week, we're all going this way, whatever, or nothing at all. And I think we can even put things in place with when things are what our expectations are for employees. Do we give any flexibility? If someone needs to leave in an emergency, are we even flexible about that?
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of the reasons people like remote work is it gives them more freedom to be able to decide how their days go. So if a kid is sick, you can go pick them up. You don't have to ask permission because you're working from home. So many of those are those little things, whereas if people were more welcome to leave work when they needed to, you would find people wouldn't be caring as much about hybrid. So it's also like it doesn't need to be in these extremes. We can learn from these things, but we can also in our own workplaces, for those leaders, think like, okay, so maybe I can't do, the most extreme, or I can't do the 4-day or the 3-day or whatever, but maybe I can give my team more ability to call the shots about when they need to leave. Or maybe I can give an extra flexible work day or something. It can even be 1 day a week. Like when I was a kid, I went to a school with uniforms, and every so often they'd give us an out of uniform day. And let me tell you, getting an out of uniform day changes your outlook about your uniform for months because you just got a chance. And I'm saying, like, if you can give people more flexibility when you're bringing them back to the office, you may find you get the buy-in a lot better if you make some room for the things that people need in their lives.
Which is why we instigated our no pants policy.
Yeah, we have insulated.
Yeah, thank you.
No, we insulated that policy.
That's the end of the
pants.
episode, everybody. Thank you so much. This is No Pants Scott, Allison, and the whole crew.
Wearing many pants.
Talk to you wearing multiple pants right now. Talk to you next week. Bye. Pants.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and visit theunpodcast.com. And remember, friends don't let friends use QR codes.